If we were on TV, we'd call it the fastest night in television. But since we are not, we're on the internet, we will call it the fastest hour on the internet. You're listening to Night Terrors Radio. We've got a fantastic show lined up for you, regardless of the fact that Rob did show up tonight. But we are going to do our best to make it work for you and only you. That one listener who just popped up. We've got now. How do I pronounce your last name, Ron? Because I've never tried to do it in front of you.
It's a lot like chivalry, so it's pronounced that way. So Chevarie.
Oh, okay. We've got Ron Chevarie on tonight for us. I like it. In fact, it's almost shivery. I kind of like that too, which gives us a little bit of that horror angle that we love so much on the show. He is an animator. He's a filmmaker. He's an all-around good guy. We're going to be talking with Ron tonight about his forthcoming film, The Who Incident. Among other things, it's going to get creepy. It's going to get a little spooky. It's Night Terrors Radio. I have got with me my ever formidable co-host, Rob J. Malmsteen.
Yeah,
our East Coast correspondent, ever vigilant, popping in.
Let's go with somewhat vigilant.
As well as Nigel Honeybutter. That is his real name, ladies and gentlemen. Not even close. Under another moniker, the man who has no name, or the man with no name if you're a Mad Max fan. We're going to be talking about all things creepy now. We're going to be talking about some very, very interesting things in the realm of the paranormal. And we'll also be talking about Ron's forthcoming film. We got a lot to cover tonight, ladies and gentlemen. So I hope you'll stick with us because we're going to have a great time. And it is the fastest hour on the internet. This is Night Terrors Radio. By the way, thanks everyone for showing up tonight. Steve, I know that you had to drive like a whole 20 minutes to get here.
A whole 20 minutes.
Rob, you had to stay awake, you old man. Thank you so much.
Working on it.
And Ron, thank you so much for being on.
Oh, it's my absolute pleasure. Thanks, guys.
By the way, Ron is one of my favorite new people. I get people that come to my life and sometimes they get recycled quickly. Not through any fault or inclination of my own, but because sometimes life serves you some single-serving friendships. But I have really come to like discussing movies and discussing the paranormal with Ron. And sometimes you meet people who just genuinely you get like a good feeling about. You feel like they're genuine people. They're trustworthy people. I got that feeling almost immediately when I started talking to you, Ron.
Ditto.
By the way, my intuition sucks. So you could be a right bastard and I wouldn't know. I'm on a few different marriages at this point, so we know how that works for me. But seriously, like you sort of know when you meet an extension of your tribe, and I felt that way almost automatically.
I agree.
Upon talking to you. We got a lot to discuss tonight. Now, if you've watched some of our other shows, Ron, the tangents run wild. Sometimes it's a catch and release sort of thing.
Yeah.
Sometimes we put them in a box, we get on with the show. But one thing that we always do is, now, are you Canadian, Ron?
Yes, I am. Can you tell? Okay. Can you tell by the
hat? And where are you located?
Just about a half an hour outside of Toronto. We're kind of in the countryside. Yeah.
What's the name of the town?
Right.
It's let's see, it's Milton. And so if you're familiar where Hamilton is, it's just north of Hamilton, practically.
Okay. I spent a little time in St. Catharines and some time in Toronto and some time in Mississauga.
Right. Yeah, Mississauga is a lot like LA.
Yeah. I just love it because Don Cherry, I'm a huge Grapes fan. What are you going to do?
Okay.
So one thing that we do here, and this is a very one of our favorite parts of the program, is that if you are aware of some of the eccentricities that happen in our lovely US of A, we have a part of the state that has fallen into what I can only call a miasma of weirdness, and that is Florida, the Panhandle.
And if you're not sure which one it is, Florida's the one that's shaped like a dick.
If you ever have a few moments and think, I would like to make myself feel better about all aspects of my life, just Google Florida man and any other bizarre term and see what article comes up. It's a game that we like to play.
Yeah.
So without further ado, we're going to go into some of our news for the night, including Florida Man. You'd think we knew what we were doing, Ron, with all this production value here.
That's
It's
awesome.
amazing. So
You think it was an actual show?
I'm going to start out news tonight, kind of on a happy, sad note. Twitter got a little less funny yesterday. Iron Sheik passed away. And I don't know if you followed the Iron Sheik on Twitter, but holy shit, that was some of the funniest stuff ever.
But then it got funnier today because Pat Robertson died.
And come on. Really? That's where we're going?
I'm sorry.
I mean, come on. Can't Cheeky have his moment? Jabroni. You want Cheeky? You want Cheeky come back? Fuck your ass. I fuck your ass.
I kind of feel like it's sort of an unspoken deal that like hypocrites live forever, right?
Yeah.
But time finally caught up
With him.
with good old Pat Robertson in '93.
But I just feel bad that Cheeky died because if you followed his Twitter account, if you ever took a moment to just go through some of his stuff, he was wrestling heel to the minute he died, I'm sure.
He was one of the best.
Oh,
I love.
I'm absolutely positive Sheiky's last words were Hulk Hogan, jabroni. I'm positive.
Well, but he was part of that core group of very iconic wrestling personalities that transcended the sport.
Yep.
Because he was one that also got into the music scene, especially when Cyndi Lauper got popular and started to popularize them as characters in her videos. He was one of the first two that would license his likeness for toys. Like he was in that core group. It was like him and Nikolai Volkov,
Hulk Hogan, Randy Savage.
Yep, Hulk Hogan. What was it? King Kong Bundy.
Yep.
Like there was a very core group of like Hot Rod, Roddy Piper. It's like there was that group that was maybe like 10, 8 to 10 very core strong characters, that personified 80s wrestling. And it is kind of strange when we see, especially, I mean, I don't know if like 80s Americana had as much impact as far north as it did, but the 80s here is sort of like, we look at it as like the golden age of the US. We still had what we thought was decent industry. We still had two political parties that we thought were actually sort of working for the betterment of mankind.
We had New Coke.
We had New Coke. We had,
we had the best cartoons and best movies. That whole time period.
So much came out.
WWF was big for us here too, and I tell you, the first WWF, I believe it was at the Skydome or at down in Toronto where the Blue Jays played.
Right.
I went to see that, and that was amazing. I think that's back in the days too when King Kong Bundy, if you remember, he was going as an alias, and everyone knew it was King Kong Bundy because nobody was that size.
Right.
Oh yeah, he was enormous.
Brilliant. I loved it.
That was the best part of like, you look back and, now, Hogan's trying to be this, righteous dude, and he's dropped the brother. Nobody drops a brother anymore, brother. And, and Macho Man's gone and Roddy Piper's gone. But Cheeky, he was true heel till he died.
Yeah.
And there's nothing wrong with that. He loved being the Iron Sheik, and he loved making people, have emotion. But so I just wanted to throw that out there because, that was a bit of my childhood that died. And he just was, he was really cool.
Yeah. He used to load the boot, if you remember. He used to load his boot up and he used to put it into the ground. And as kids, we were wrestling on lawns. And I'm here to say that I'm lucky to be alive.
Yeah.
that I didn't literally break my neck. We would do pile drivers, not knowing how to do them properly, right?
Well,
Right.
and we all know that kitchen chairs were made far differently back then.
Yes.
Yeah, man. Yeah, and tables.
The woodwork spindles, the curved back that came right here under your jaw, just to ensure you were going to lose at least one tooth.
Yeah.
Kitchen chairs in the realm of living room wrestling were killers.
Yeah. Not to mention those pills they made afterwards when the young kids were tossing those at you. Poof, you got bruises.
Oh yeah, yeah. So speaking of the 80s, I am an avid collector. Like I love circa all the way from like the 50s to the early 90s toys. I'm a toy collector. I love toys. So you can't see it, but I totally now finished my 1979 Kenner Alien. My 18-inch Kenner Alien is totally finished now. I've got a Ray Dean Jumbo Shogun Warrior that's totally restored. I've also got a Shogun Warrior Godzilla now that I've restored. I've got some die-cast Shogun Warriors, and I've got some older stuff sprinkled all the way through the house, and I've even actually got some Aurora model kits here.
Nice.
So I just love this stuff. But I picked something up today, which is not vintage, but since we're talking about the 80s, these two things I thought were extremely cool. So I was at one of the local big box retail stores and I picked it up. So I got to show everybody what joined the collection today. A couple of cool things because I am an avid collector of Indiana Jones.
Oh, wow.
So they've started to make these
those are nice.
Very nicely articulated Indiana Jones bigger figures based off of the old films. This one's from Raiders, and it comes with 3 sets of hands, the fertility idol, and a whole bunch of other stuff. So was really happy there. And if this does not scream 80s, I don't know what does. This is actually
That's awesome.
a Cobra Kai Daniel LaRusso as a Power Ranger action figure.
That's a mashup.
The absurdity of it was so great.
You
I
had to buy
choice.
it.
Yeah.
Absolutely had to buy it.
Speaking of absurdity, I can't let our Florida man story get too much later into this.
No, it can't languish.
Well, no, because we want to talk to Ron, and I mean, Florida man is by far my favorite cryptid.
Right.
But coming out of Tampa Bay, Florida man with heroin and meth arrested after breaking into private patio to charge phone. So, Spring Hill, Florida, a Florida man found himself behind bars on burglary charges and drug charges after deputies say he broke into the patio of a Hernando County home to charge his phone. Deputies with the Hernando County Sheriff's Office say they were called to a home on Malacano Avenue in Spring Hill around 7:15 a.m. on Wednesday after a woman discovered a strange man sitting on her patio. And apparently, Anthony Stravino. Let's go with that.
I thought for sure his name would be Chad.
Oh, maybe that's his middle name. Maybe it's Anthony.
Yeah, it could be.
Stravino.
Anthony Chad Stravino.
So apparently, he just decided that his phone needed to be charged, so he broke into this woman's house and plugged up so he could get a few bars on his phone. And deputies say they found small plastic baggies of heroin. They say they also found another bag of heroin on him and a bag of methamphetamine in a small zippered case located in his backpack. They also that also contained multiple small empty plastic baggies, a used syringe, and a scale. So Stravino has been charged with burglary of an occupied dwelling.
He had like his mobile office.
He did. I mean, the picture is amazing what they took off this dude. Yeah. He was.
I have to think that he was only charging his phone. If this was 20 years ago, he was waiting for a call back from his cable provider for installation hours. You can't miss that call.
Right.
They won't come back for like another 2
and
weeks.
then, when you're all vegged out on the couch, and you hit the nod and you wake up and you're like, oh, still no cable. That's a you don't need that.
Right.
You
Yeah.
need.
I mean, you can only watch those reruns of Chip so many times on the, over the air retro 70s television they provide.
I just want to know, again, we go back to this. Is there no limit to Florida Man? Is there no limit?
No.
Because
there is no limit.
Ron, just to let you know, at one point we played the Give Me Florida Man in any 2 words. So Ash gave me colostomy bag, and one of our old guest hosts gave me fight. So I typed in Florida Man colostomy bag fight. Sure enough, Florida Man was arrested after, in the middle of a bar fight, swinging his colostomy bag at the bouncers.
Oof.
You can't make this shit up. You just can't.
I still remember a very cold October night in the Pine Barrens of New Jersey, as I was in a very dingy, dusty hole-in-the-wall bar, and a fight broke out. And I thought we were going to see a murder, but an elderly man pulled out none other than an emery board to fight with. This is a true story. Not a switchblade, not a pocket knife, an emery board.
Wow.
And no cuticles went unheard of.
Wow. You may as well grab a banana at that point. It's funny, at least.
Yeah, exactly.
But what if he comes at?
I mean,
if he comes at with a pointed stick?
Because of banana.
Did anybody get that one? Did that one really
that
fall
was
death?
like I shot right from the hip.
Did you?
Come on.
Yep. Okay.
All right, Ash.
Let's let Ron save this show.
Hang on. No one got the. What if he comes at you with a point head stick?
A point head stick? We're going somewhere else now. Oh.
On, where's the rim shot sound effect here? I thought I had it loaded up.
Shut up.
We're talking with Ron Chevarie, for those who have tuned in with us tonight, and those that made it into the first 18 minutes.
Wow.
That's how much we've wasted of Ron's time already.
I gotta go.
We're good.
Holy mother of God.
We're good at this.
So Ron is a filmmaker. He's an animator. He's an artist. All around great guy. He is a filmmaker whose forthcoming film, The Who Incident, is what you would call it in post-production right now. Correct, Ron?
Yes, it's very near the end of post. Yeah.
So if you can, give us a little bit of a background on sort of who you are and what brought you to The Who Incident. Like maybe a little bit of a Ron Chevarie retrospect tonight.
All right. Well, my background is 30 plus years in the animation industry, primarily as a cleanup artist. So that's taking the animator's roughs and on a separate level, doing the final cleanup that you see painted on the screen. I've also done animation. I've done effects animation. You name the commercial mascot, and I've probably drawn him way back in the days at Animation House, a commercial house studio, and a bunch of different ones in Toronto. Many features, many shorts, strange things like the Drew Carey Daffy Duck opening, if you remember that from years ago. Mm-hmm. We did a section of that as well, to Space Jam, going all the way back to that. And one of my most recent one would have been The Boy and the Mole, Fox and the Horse. And now we're in a digital age. So since 2013, I've been drawing digitally. Paper is no longer a thing when it comes to feature films. It's all done digitally, but it's using a digital pen, so it still has the feel of classic cleanup in animation. Let's see. From there, COVID had hit many years ago, 3 years ago. Seems like ages ago, right?
Oh, right. Yeah.
And it
seems like an epoch.
I know.
An epoch long gone.
And so my wife Jan and I were here on this large property, and we weren't seeing anybody. And, we talked to the animals, but that year we talked even more. And We both luckily had work coming through, so we work remotely. Me right here at my desk, and Jan right beside me. We're that tight that we don't rip each other's heads off working in the same room every day. I was stir crazy. I know Jan was, and I tapped into something I've always wanted to do. We had time, we had a little bit of money, and I always wanted to make my own horror movie. I've always wanted to do that. I'm a monster child, so much like you probably, Ash. I grew up on famous monsters, graduated to Fangoria, you name it, black and white color. As long as it was horror and especially monsters, I was all over it.
Yep.
Combine that with a lifetime of listening to Art Bell, Coast to Coast, George Norrie, and just feeding my knowledge and feeding my imagination. I turned to Jan and said, Jan, would you make a movie with me? How about that? And Jan is so sweet that she agreed. She knew how much it meant to me, that it was a life dream that we could actually, she could help me accomplish. And so she agreed to go on this journey and actually be in the film with me. We kind of co-starred together for most of the movie, and we're not actors, but we have personalities, let's just say, and a large part of ourselves go into the characters. Not all of our personality, but a large part of it. Peace and love. So that's essentially how it came to be through COVID and through isolation. And it took us about a year to two to lock down a story that we were really happy with. And for the last year around this time, we went into production, and primarily it was Jan and I that were shooting. So Jan, in essence, was my DP, and we used two different cameras. We actually used a small little JVC camera that's an amateur pro-am cam, and we also had a secondary camera in the form of video glasses that within the story, they're gifted to Jan from me, and we want to capture memories. So this is a POV horror. It was a long road. And after all is said and done, it's changed and morphed so much into something even larger than we initially planned, because initially I was talking to Jan about zero budget and trying to make it on our own and do the effects on our own. I'm kind of crafty with some of that. We do have some practical effects in this. I've created a partial puppet arm, the partial hand for the creature. We've enlisted friends and family that are friends, if you know what I mean.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah.
So it's a real love project, and many of the people involved on the production aren't even getting paid. It's such a passion project. And so some people are working extra hours beyond their work to help get it to certain stages all the way along. And we have primarily 3 people that are doing all the visual effects. If you ever look at credits and even a movie that has a small amount of CGI or VFX, it's a crew doing each stage.
Oh yeah.
We've only got 3 people. And so the reason why it's taken 3 years is just that. It's a crew's worth of work that got done by 3 people.
Oh yeah. Yeah. I can definitely sympathize with you there. Believe me. So it's interesting to see a lot of the same cross-pollination that happens with a lot of creative people, especially people who love horror and sci-fi, because we all come back to, like you were talking about, that love for, Forrest Ackerman and Famous Monsters of Filmland.
Yeah.
I was talking earlier off the air about Aurora model kits, that were a fascination of mine as a child. And we seem to all sort of gravitate toward these things. And especially I see now more as an adult than I think I did when I was younger, this huge cross-pollination of horror and the paranormal.
Mm.
So you were saying you used to, listen to Art Bell, Coast to Coast is, it's been my go-to for years. And now we've entered into an era, obviously, of podcasting where you can throw a rock and, and find a worthwhile podcast to sort of fill that need for the paranormal.
Yeah.
So you've got some elements in your film that are sort of what I would call passing strange paranormal.
Yes.
So talk a little bit about that fascination with the paranormal and how it translated into this movie for you.
Okay, definitely. So it's no spoiler if you see our trailer. We do talk about my character Ron, his father having been passed away for quite a while, and so we introduce a ghostly visitation. We introduce the concept of trigger objects through a beloved toy that Dad used to own, that's been passed down to me. And a lot of these things come from the stories that I hear, even some personal accounts. I don't think I've ever told you this, Ash, but I do have a daughter. I don't go on Facebook about it. I'm very private about her. I like her to have her own life. She's not really on Facebook. She's a lot older now. She's going to University of Toronto for psych. But when she was really young, when she was born, my dad had passed away before he had a chance to see her. And I had a dream in which I went to my old home, the starter home I grew up in as a child. And I went down into the basement with my daughter in my arms. Literally, she was a few months old because she was. And I walked downstairs, and lo and behold, my father was standing at his work table. And I was shocked. And I said, I introduced my daughter to my father. And we had such a beautiful interaction. I woke up with tears. And I believe in visitation through dream.
Yeah.
I know people that have had visitation physically in front of them. It's such a crazy thing now to think that so many people are having experiences. The paranormal is blown off the charts on TV with reality TV.
Yeah.
Granted, a lot of that I believe is very faked and it's hard to watch, but it's drawn a common interest in the public. And I think more and more now in these trying times, people are looking for things outside of our scope that might give us hope.
I think if there's one thing that paranormal television has done is, as much as I think, unfortunately, it's exposed the chicanery and all of that, but I think what it also has done is it's at least legitimized conversation about it, which I think was something that was hard for people to approach.
No. It has made everything that we as paranormal investigators do 600 times harder than it needs to be. Because
I'm not saying that, but I'm saying like the public.
The normalization of the conversation is the biggest douchebag on television, back Zaggins, because I think if we say his name and douchebag, he'll sue us, but fuck him. Loves to just create drama around it, and you get all these people that are drawn to the drama, and the conversations aren't about, hey, I have this going on, hey, I need help. It's about the drama of it. And 23 years in the business, this is the worst time ever in paranormal history. The worst.
And I think for a large cross section, you're right, but I think for people who maybe aren't into it, or are not involved in it, or aren't part of, and I hate to call it an industry, but part of the industry, I think what it has enabled us to do is it's enabled someone to say, hey, I saw this on television the other night and I had a similar experience. I think that it has at least opened a doorway for the mainstream public to talk about things in a way that maybe they wouldn't have been so publicly chastised for,
and people not call them crazy.
Yes. Yeah.
Like, oh yeah, you're a nut job because you said you saw something.
The problem is,
right.
The problem is, and Ron, I don't know how deep you go into the paranormal. Certain television shows are still promoting orbs as ghost evidence. I get 500 to 1,000 pictures and videos a year emailed to me. Oh my God, I'm being visited by ghosts and demons because it's a red orb.
Yeah, this whole demon thing has taken on a life of its own, and
it has ruined the paranormal industry in my mind.
And it's to me that kind of it shows a need in people to be thrill seekers that look for extreme things, possibly getting hurt. Like, hey, I don't like those situations. I've had strange things happen to me. I've never once thought that it was demonic. I don't know what it is,
Right.
but I've never went, oh, it's a demon. And you know, religion really can muddle things up as well too. And I'll simply state and see. Years ago, I never went on the record unless I was personally talking with somebody and I wasn't being recorded on certain things that have actually taken place with me, because I was worried about that enigma of being called a crazy person as well too. Some people in the industry would know me as that crazy guy because I've told some people some stories and they're like, I don't know if he's for real or not.
Well, one thing that I think the audience is going to really enjoy about your film, Ron, is that humans in particular have this need to categorize. We have a need to check a box and go, this is definitely here, this is definitely there. We've sort of become obsessed with compartmentalization. You know, I think the more civilized we get, and when it comes to the paranormal specifically, I think this has relevance because we're talking about people labeling things as demonic. We're so quick to say this is this is that, and somehow we believe that in categorizing or documenting that way, that we're making it real. And I think unfortunately what we're doing is we're not recognizing that this might be stranger than we think it is. That we don't have the answers. And I think that you show that a lot in your film, that we've got different aspects of what would be called the paranormal here, or alien or cryptid or whatever. And these things might not be as far apart as we think they are.
Right.
Okay, can you speak to that a little bit?
Definitely. Well, we as humans try to define, as you said, I'll just kind of repeat what you said. We try to define the parameters of reality. So when something strange occurs, we try and find that box to categorize it in. And we're doing that with a language that is so little compared to maybe how big this whole picture is, where we're trying to put our own little tiny words on a description to describe things like cryptids, you know, all the way across the look at something, for instance, like what is it, Skinwalker Ranch. That checks everything off the boxes. And to be honest, around here, we've got strange stuff that's kind of across the spectrum as well, too. So why is that stuff all connected? Why does one thing trigger another thing? You know, I've heard a lot about, like, look at Point Pleasant as well, too, with the whole Mothman occurrence back in the 60s, right?
Right.
They were talking about like paranormal, like aggressive ghost encounters happening preceding and before they had Mothman sightings. There were strange things they were seeing in the sky. It ran the gambit. And more, the dialogue that I've been hearing in the last 10, 15 years, more and more people are starting to correlate those things potentially. But still, none of us really know what's going on. We can postulate, but we can't say that we're experts on anything until we're on that other side.
I think the older I get, and I'm not even really speaking in age in terms of years, but the more I'm here, the more I'm present, and the more I'm open to things, the more I have quickly realized that I don't really know jack shit. I really don't know anything. I like to be able to postulate. I like to be able to sit and go, hey, I think this is what it is, and you know, and rap about that the way that I can. But I know that I've went in the last 15 years from being what I would call, well, probably more like 20, 25 years, what I would call a devout and diehard atheist, to becoming someone that it might not be a recognized or structured belief system, but I am definitely a theist of things. as opposed to that atheist that I used to be. And that doesn't mean that I have any more answers. In fact, I probably have less, because I thought I had all the answers when I was an atheist, and I wanted to tell everybody. By the way, I want to tell everybody the answer. I think atheists, in a way, are as uh, uh, they're more of a proclamation based religion than even the Jehovah's Witness, in a sense. Like, we're all about converting. Like, we want people to not believe with us. There's solidarity in all of us not believing at the same time. And that was sort of my religious party, and my fanaticism was telling people not to believe. And then the more that I'm present, the more that I have come to the conclusion that there are things that I've experienced that have been undeniable, and that have been correlated, corroborative experiences with family and with friends that allude to an experience that goes beyond our heartbeat and the breath in our lungs. So there's something there. So one thing that I really wanted to talk to you about is the theme of owls, because you and I, sort of separately and in conversation, have alluded to this visage, or the symbol of an owl, and other people have too. I know that early on in his recognition of some of his experiences, Whitley Strieber had a very strong connection with the pictures, drawings, paintings of owls specifically. So can we talk about that a little bit? Like, because it's the Who incident, and when people get to see it, obviously there's this very strong connection to the representation of owls, and sort of this otherworldly visage that they have.
Right. Well, Ron's character, Dad, had a thing for owls, and you'll find out in the movie. And the actual trigger objects, we belovedly called him Owlie. And we journey into the symbolism of owls that represents, like, I jokingly say an owl is something that has one wing in and one wing out, right? That crosses over. Owls are messengers from the other side. They've throughout time and history, owls are symbolically known to be that, to be wise messengers as well too. They're not just coming to say, "Hey, how's it going?" There's messages they have to give you, right? It's believed, and that's something that we focus on in this. And ironically, we had owls that were really, I think I've said before, they were screech. I think they were hoot owls. We had them showing up during shots, the sequence around the fire pit, and as well when Jan and I were running around like madmen in the dark in the forest. Owls seemed to be interested, literally, while we were filming. So it's a strange. Later, I can't wait till the film's out so we can talk a bit more on spoiler levels to talk to you about my connection with owls too, and directly with this film. That I can't really get into right now for obvious reasons.
So I have like a fantasy, like a huge deep dive into the fantasy world of owls. And, it was so strange to me, like when I first read the Harry Potter series, that the owls were the messengers. And when you go back and you look at some of the things, the owl was always the doomsayer in the movie. Like when the owl hooted, you turned around, and then that was like your last minute or your last moment on Earth.
And let's not forget Bubo the owl, from Clash of the Titans.
Oh yeah,
I was just gonna say that.
Which is one of my favorite Ray Harryhausen creations.
And as a trope, owls, whenever you're watching a horror movie, you'll generally hear an owl hooting at night, and it's designed to send shivers down your spine, because owls, I believe, long ago would have been more feared.
And to me, I'm going to ask just a quick question as to how I viewed them. But like, to me, they have, you said that one wing in, one wing out. I kind of almost feel like the reverence came from the fact that they were that you didn't see them during the day, really. If you did, you were very lucky, and it was considered an omen, and then when you heard them at night, or you saw them, or interact in any way with them at night, it was that everybody stop moment.
Yeah.
And again, growing up, it was just one of those things. Like if we heard them, we were like, it just freaked us right out.
Mm-hmm.
As kids out in the field, and
you really had nothing to fear unless you were a cat or a mouse. But
right.
If you look, I think that it could even go all the way back to like the original Dracula, to the original Bram Stoker story, to the Universal movie, where children of the night were the minion of Dracula and the demon. And so owls kind of got a bad rap way back then, I think, in the sense that people feared them because they thought they were dangerous. And people fear magic, and people fear witches, and witches really exist. They're not bad people. Some
people. Of them were downright hot.
Oh yeah, and some of them are awesome people. Like I know many, and they're great people, and so it's a stigma. It always has been. Hollywood, does kind of plant stigma in people's minds. The average person that doesn't know much about certain things like that might actually have that in their mind now because they saw a little clip in a movie or something. We hope to play that up a little bit more in ours.
If I was able to play copyrighted music, but Facebook would take it down, we would ring out the show with a little song called Sucker for the Witch from Clutch, which talks about the lead singer's sexual proclivity to the girls of the pagan religion.
I thought you wouldn't say owls.
Aren't we allowed 17 seconds of the song without getting in trouble?
Could we?
I'm pretty sure we're allowed 17 seconds without being in trouble.
Good, yeah.
Well, anyways, for those of you who have not heard the song "Sucker for the Witch" by Clutch, he does reference Stevie Nicks in it, and I think he hits the nail on the head. So, congratulations, him as a songwriter, for nailing a particular fetish of mine. Thank you. But yeah, it's owls are a weird thing. I think at some point in time too, and it's been popularized in cinema. And I went back and sort of took a look at what some of the first connections were between the abduction phenomena and owls. So, and I cannot remember the name of the case now, which every other day I could, but since I'm live on the air, it's escaping me. There was a very celebrated account of alien invasion that took place on a Kentucky homestead.
We've talked about this so many times.
Where a family was besieged by spindly aliens, large almond eyes. And even though they apparently had very close-up sightings and encounters with them through the span of a night, apparently a whole night, they were literally, again, besieged by these creatures trying to get into their home, and they were warding them off with shotguns.
Wow. But
the official explanation by the county sheriff was that they were seeing owls. Now, I would have to say, even for those of my mountain folk kindred, of which I have many in this part of the country, the one thing that they do know is they know the animals and objects surrounding them to great detail.
The Kelly Hopkinsville encounter.
Right. And one thing, regardless of if you're dealing with, whether it's the Jackson Whites of northern New Jersey, or you're dealing with West Virginians that might not have their 6th grade education, is that these people, more often than not, though, are very astute about their geography, about the animals surrounding them, about things like the weather. There's a very strong earth connection with a lot of these people, and I do not believe that they were seeing owls. I think that these people knew almost all indigenous species of animal, and could tell whether or not owls were trying to break into their home. But that was one of the first known written connections that I saw published, making that connection.
And the funny thing too is, I mean, we've discussed this before, Ash, with that encounters. They claimed that there were 25 to 30 of them around the house, and I've never ever, in all the times I've ever seen owls, seen more than 2 together.
No.
They're very solitary.
Never in those large of numbers.
Right.
I mean, I think for the most part, you wouldn't even see probably more than 5 or 6 unless they were very, very young. Together, it seems. It seems like a lot of adult owls, you don't really see.
Don't they have like a big area that they kind of dominate?
And they almost have to.
Might know the answer to that one.
Yeah, actually, we get them calling to each other, and generally we get 2 to 3, and we're talking spans of like miles away from each other. And so they have their own territory butt up against each other. And I think the warning call is like, hey, I'm over here, so you better not come over. Okay. And you hear it back and forth a lot at night. And so I think they're territorial that way. But getting back to your story, Ash, like think about this. Depending on when that happened, what group of police, what police force is going to admit that they came across a bunch of aliens that were attacking people in their home? They're not going to.
Well, this was 1955.
Oh, definitely not, because they'd be going to the.
Yeah, that's not going to happen.
They'd be called loonies. They'd be driven out of town back in those days.
Right. Yeah, and especially in small communities, boy, if you don't have any desire to move, you're going to get a nickname that sticks quick.
Oh yeah. I believe it even happened if you go back and you look at the Flatwood Monster case. I think there was a lot of stigma that was attached to the young children, especially they grew up in that small town in Braxton County, I believe, their whole life. And I went on a crypto tour with our producer Ashleen and Jan many years ago through West Virginia and around. We stopped off in Braxton County. We met Andrew, the owner of the museum there. He graciously opened it up after hours for us, and he explained to us, because I asked, "Do you think we might be able to go and talk to some of the remaining eyewitnesses?" And he said, "No, they don't want to talk to anybody now because the locals have kind of stained them." Because that goes all the way back to then, and they're still holding that. So small towns, they don't let go of stuff.
No, you're absolutely right. Strangely, what we've had in my area, and I'm in a very rural part of Illinois, is that we've been having a pretty large influx of Sasquatch or Bigfoot sightings here, within miles of where I live.
What about how far was that one that was like a year ago that we tried to get the guy on and he was really sketchy about coming on?
That was about 5 miles actually of where Steve lives.
Okay.
That close, in a small town called Pawnee, Illinois, which I did used to live in. And that was a problem that we had, was that we were trying to get the individual that had not only had the sighting, but I believe he'd collected about 50 to 60 cast footprints.
Yeah, he had a lot of evidence
in the area. And he ended up actually refusing to come on.
Wow. Well, yeah, you can understand maybe why, right?
Well, see, no, I'm so confused by this because I've been a believer for a long time. I grew up in New Jersey. The Jersey Devil was something that we always heard about. And, when you have a personal experience with something like that and you kind of, I don't know, maybe I tend to fall on the crypto side of, it could be, it really could be. And we got a message from someone listening to the show that Wikipedia has the Kelly story as they were meteors and owls together.
Wow.
So the owls were playing catch with the meteors, or the meteors were playing catch with the owls.
Maybe some swamp gas,
They said in cahoots, which
Why
makes
not
it even
throw
funnier.
that? Yeah,
cahoots.
I do agree that went largely unnoticed. Yeah. Cahoots was a great way to describe it.
Right.
Yeah,
yes.
I got the pun, but so I think like we talked about this once back on Parafactor, Ash. We had the guy that was investigating the giant birds. You remember that?
Ken Gerhardt.
Yes.
was
Thank
that
you.
individual's.
Thunderbirds.
Yeah.
Yes.
Of which my mother had a sighting that made it into more than one book.
Hi, Brenda.
And I'm probably listening because she does love the subject matter.
Hi, Brenda.
And we've always been in very rural areas. I mean, the house that I live in now is out in the middle
of nowhere.
Of nowhere. We've got about 60 feet of light from a large LED on a pole outside. Once you get out of that 60 feet, forget it. It's black. There's nothing. And before that, I lived rural areas most of my childhood. So it wasn't uncommon that occasionally someone came up to you and said, I just saw something that is outside of my frame of reference. I don't know how to really talk about it. My mother was driving home, not even late one night, and saw what she thought was a man in the middle of the road. And she said he was extremely tall, looked to be 6'9", 6'10", and it looked like he had a trench coat on. And then when she got closer, she noticed that this thing had what she thought was like a beak.
Wow.
And that its skin was leathery. And she watched as it unfolded its wings, which she said, I think, stretched from drainage dish to drainage dish.
Yeah, she remember we had her on and she talked about it with us.
And took off vertically.
Wow. That's incredible.
And strangely enough, my dad had a similar experience about a year ago with something the same size about 15 miles away from where they used to live. And you will find some of those stories based around a small town in Illinois called Catlin, Illinois. And even where we're at, which we're relatively close to Alton, Illinois, because we're close to St. Louis and Missouri here, you will see rock paintings of the Thunderbirds in Alton.
Wow.
But that is part of their mythology.
Wow.
I just remember that. I mean, I remember the old Parafactor show, and like when we talked to that guy, and when we were done, I think I was a guest on that night too, or it was like somehow it was you and John and Mark and I afterwards all going, okay, I'm not going outside. I'm going to stay inside for the rest of the night.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. But yeah, it's just very, very interesting how, again, the cross-pollination of these things. Now I won't get too deep into this on the air, but as we were making our film, we started to realize that there was a little bit of self-fulfilling prophecy going on. The more that we discussed things, the more that we focused on things, the more it seemed that we were drawing in phenomena. Was that something you experienced, Ron?
Oh, yeah. You see, once again, I'm going to lose friends and I'm going to sound crazy, right? But I'm in good company here, I think. So.
Oh,
You're going to make friends.
Good.
Make friends.
Good. Replace those ones that aren't hep to my jive. But
yeah.
So twice we had a daytime event, we had a nighttime event. We weren't planning on this. In fact, the daytime event was a pickup scene where I needed to show that there was nothing up in the sky, to explain why maybe there was or wasn't a sound that we just heard. And when I whipped the camera up, so I've got 3 takes of this. In one of the takes, nothing. In the other 2 takes, and one of these I've shared up on our YouTube channel, Haunted Lodge Productions, if anyone wants to see. One of these takes, or the one we're actually using in our film, you're going to see it in the film. There's these white orbs that they look like pollen flying in the air or fluff, but they have a mind of their own. There's formations that take place. If you look really closely, there's probably about 10 to 12 different things going on with one main white orb that's really close to a turkey vulture. In fact, I thought it was a tern, which are these birds we get that dive on our pond and they dive for fish and they look like seagulls. So in the bright sunny day, they kind of glow a little bit in the sky. And that's what I thought it was. Didn't know this until I came up on the deck. Jan said, I asked her, did you see stuff flying around? And she's like, yeah. And I said, was that like a pollen or a fluff? She's like, no, it wasn't. And I could she could see it from her angle too, which was probably about 50 feet away. So there was that one. And then there's another scene where we show it on our YouTube page. I've actually done tracking on this one because at one point Jan picks up the camera that's in the locked position, and I've tracked the shot so it stays fairly locked in to the shot. So you can see the movement I'm talking about. At one point, Jan leans forward, and when she leans back from the area she just leaned back in, you see this blue orb. Boink! It just pops out of nowhere in the sky. And this is a nighttime shot. It's dark enough that we can see a silhouette of trees, and it pops just above it. We do our dialogue. I run inside the house as part of the shot. Jan, as part of the shot, goes around, picks up the camera, and whips it to look at me. And I do a reaction when I come out. When she physically, this orb did not move. And when she physically grabbed that camera, you can see it in the tracking. The minute she touched it and started to lift it up, this thing moves about this fast and goes over the trees and kind of tucks behind it. And by then, Jan's whipping the camera off. We didn't, in fact, if you watch it, you might think, oh, maybe it's a setup, because you'll see it. It's a rough BTS. And so you hear me calling action. And just before that, when I sit down, I say to Jan, that looks like an orb over there, but don't get distracted. Let's get our lines down. And luckily we got the shot, because this is another scene that we're going to use within our film. And it's really strange. I don't know if people watch the movie and they don't hear this pre-story, they won't maybe understand that it's a natural thing that occurred. I had the feeling that we were being watched. I really did. And I didn't feel threatened. I don't know what it is. And I know I'm going to sound even stranger when I say that it felt ancestral. Don't know what to say.
Thematically, that is something that I keep coming back to a lot often in my storytelling. There are themes that to me they're naturally redundant in the things that I try to explore, and a lot of that is this idea of legacy, this idea of things being ancestral, and things being hereditary in a lot of senses. So we're almost at the top of the hour. Like I said, the fastest hour of the internet. We do one thing when we talk about things that are strange, supernatural, abnormal, and that is we usually go through what one of the strangest things you've experienced in your lifetime is, but we have a meter that we measure it on, and that meter is the Pant Shitometer.
And Shitometer!
Jesus Christ.
So we talk
about another piece of that excellent high quality production value that we have.
Yeah, classic.
So we talk about a strange incident, and then we talk about its rating 1 to 10, 10 being the shittiest, as in the most soiled that we can get.
So that's good.
How scared we were.
Okay.
So in your lifetime, what hit maybe an 8 or 9 on the Pant Shitometer, and what was it?
Right. Well, I've had a few things. I've shared this story recently. I've never shared it before, but let me share it with you again. I think this qualifies. A dear friend of mine, Cayman, who actually is one of our Foley artists. He's one of the dear friends that are involved in the Who incident. He and his wife, Alex, have this property. They've had it for a long time. It's around Orangeville, Ontario. Extremely haunted. Unbelievable. He's got a work shed. It's a work barn. A more modern one. Within the work barn, he's got a large work area, and he's got a walled off area, sub-walled off area called the Den of Iniquities, right? It sounds like we did bad stuff, but we didn't. We had some drinks, we partied a bit, but we were always really creative in this space. And I spent a lot of time there with Cayman, and it was like a giant man cave. Well, don't you know, we were having a drum jam, tribal drums like djembes. We had about 12 people in the Den of Iniquities. There were these 3 helmets. They were reproductions of medieval helmets. It looked like the real deal. These things weighed about 15 to 20 pounds each, I believe. They were up on that sub wall, one of the sub walls that I was sitting behind in this drum circle. I was probably about 5 feet off the wall, away from the wall easily. And as we were drumming and trancing, I got a feeling something was happening. Something told me to look over my shoulder. As I kept drumming, I looked up, and as I looked up, I saw something flashing right towards me. So I tried to turn my head out of the way. I didn't pull it out and fast enough. One of these helmets had smashed me into the side of the head, so much so that it bent my glasses arm at a 90 degrees.
Oh, wow.
I think I experienced a mild concussion. The drumming stopped immediately. It was this big kabash, and I made eye contact with one of the drummers just before I looked over my shoulder across the way from me. I noticed he was looking up. So afterwards, I'm like, "Hey man, what did you see?" And he was shocked. He was like, "What I saw, it looked like somebody picked up one of those helmets and held it there, floated about a foot or two off the wall. And it's like somebody took with whatever greatest force they could and just launched it at your bloody head." And that's what he saw. This thing didn't just fall off. And even if it did from the drumming, which they'd never moved, years and years of drumming in there, by the way,
right,
banging, they would have just fallen off. This thing was launched at my head. And yeah, that's one of a few stories that took place in this location.
Well, we can't thank you enough, Ron, for being honest tonight. Again, we blow through this hour so quickly. We have so much to talk about. When can people expect, and I know this is probably pretty premature, but when do you think people might be able to expect the Who incident?
We're hoping.
And where would they find more out about it? Where would they find out more about you? What are channels that they can connect with to find out more?
Okay, thanks. Well, if anyone's interested in me personally, I'm on IMBD, Ron Chevarie, and it'll give you an idea of some of the animation I've done in the past. As far as the Who incident goes, we are Haunted Lodge Productions on YouTube. We're also on Facebook, Haunted Lodge Productions, and we've got the Who incident on Facebook, TikTok, and Instagram if anybody wants to connect with us there. We're hoping for a fall release. It would be great to get it out around Halloween. That'd be perfect. Hint, hint, universe. And we will have physical copies for sale eventually. And we do want to get it onto as many streaming services as possible too, and VOD possibly.
Would you be willing to come back with us after it's out, and then we can get into a little bit deeper the story?
I would love to. That'd be my pleasure, guys.
Yeah, okay. That'd be awesome.
Well, again, thank you so much for being on with us tonight, Ron. And for those wanting to, they can find out more about Ron Chevarie. They can find out more about the Who incident. Take a look online. Find out what you can, especially through the channels that Ron's listed with us tonight. For those of you who will be with us, we'll be having more of Night Terrors Radio. We've been on a little bit of a hiatus sabbatical, and now we're back into it. For those who have not seen Holes in the Sky, it is currently on multiple streaming platforms still. We will also be releasing our horror anthology on the festival circuit later this year with found footage pioneers Josh Brucker and Brown both contributing. And we've got some great things lined up there. And hopefully we'll have a few surprises for everyone. Thanks everyone so much for watching. You can always take a look at Night Terrors Radio on Night Terrors Radio, the Facebook page, on YouTube, as well as horror-fix.com as we upload our new episodes. Thank you so much, everyone. Have